If at any point in time you find yourself outside of the spectrum of values of the community with which you associate yourself, you might develop a perspective, a very entitled one, of that society either being shit and you're so much better now than it because you've grown so much, or maybe that it had turned shit at one point and you are the OG whose responsibility is to make everything great again. To get political for a minute, people tend to have, say, a shithole perspective on places like Russia or maybe China. Terrible places, right? Wrong. They may be for you because you have certain very specific needs a country doesn't satisfy. You believe it is a garbage place. However, what most people fail to recognize is that since those things are hardly possible in the country anyway, very few people born and raised in it actually develop said needs. Therefore, said limitations don't affect them, and they are perfectly happy living in the same country that you find unbearably suffocating. And such situations don't have to be something with a long history of things being a certain way for a long time, and then you, the special snowflake, grow out of those things. Sometimes things can legitimately just regress, not necessarily stay the same and you get better. No, things can get worse. True. But if said regression is still supported by the majority, that still reaffirms the fact that you are just not representative of the target demographic for the thing, the place, the service, the whatever. Societal priorities shift over time. Values shift over time. Like, say, in rap music just a few years ago, maybe about a decade or so, good beats and good rhymes used to be valued. Now they are valued not. What is valued is wet as pussy. When you are at one point find out that the society that was in the past aligned with your views and your values, that society no longer shares them with you, it's the problem with you, really, not the problem with the world. It is your responsibility to be true to yourself. It's not the other's responsibility to stay true to you. I have two general thoughts on the topic of something you love degrading and falling apart. One, you associate with things voluntarily. Your identity is not tied to a label. You take on labels yourself. I am a gamer. I am a patriot. I am a communist. I am an angsty teenager. Labels don't choose you. They don't care about you. Meanings of labels also change over time as the majority of people wearing them change. Therefore, those labels become representative of something just a while ago they were not. If your values stay the same as the labels you have voluntarily been carrying change to something that is no longer representative of you, you can still stick to your values. You can be your own person, or you can ally yourself with other places, other things, other communities that currently support what you find meaningful. You don't have to follow the crowd and just be disappointed in the crowd. There's not a lot of productivity in it. Instead of surrendering your identity to a circle of friends or geographical neighborhood, go Beavers and such, Antarctica #1, or again, surrendering kind of like your identity and your values and whatever to the circle of your professional peers or consumers of the same hobby, and thus allowing yourself to be heartbroken when the community inevitably moves on to something else, to something that has nothing to do with why you are or were part of that community. And then you become resentful and spend all your time being a hater. Instead of doing all that, you could just look around, find where all the good things went after being abandoned by your previous community, and go join those things there. Be happy and support what you love. Thought number 2, thing that keeps its name over a long period of time and possibly even has the same people behind it for all of its existence is not necessarily the same thing at different points in time. Metallica today is not Metallica 30 years ago. Those are two absolutely different bands. Motorsport today and motorsport 50 years ago are two absolutely different things that have nothing in common except for the very basic idea. This principle applies to literally everything. Music in general, video games in general, people, countries. Things tend to evolve or devolve out of their original set of principles, but to still inherit the old name. It happens all the time with genres of music, political parties, models of cars, models of phones. When you feel that things are shifting to something that no longer aligns with the original sales pitch, it is okay to let that thing be and just go your own way. Oh, Cyberscam 2077 is a bad game. Well, how about instead of playing it and crying, you just play something good and enjoy yourself? Modern, I don't know, American pop music is bad? Well, how about you listen to some non American or non modern American pop music? Is that crazy of an idea? Nothing other than yourself is caging you inside your misery. Instead of being loyal to a label, nothing is stopping you from being loyal to what you believe that label should represent. And then you could find instances of that representation, join the community around them, and nourish good things about them. Sticking to the old community purely as a hater is just being a sore loser. Instead of being a loser, you can accept that the thing you're fighting for no longer exists under the old name because the people in charge of it, who essentially own the name, had decided to go in a different direction. There's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. But fortunately, it's just a name. It doesn't really matter. And even that, you can eventually win back, really, but you need to keep your values alive elsewhere first, instead of letting them die and just bitch to the wrong community about what they should be doing. Create something better. Even if you're not a creator, you can still do it by being a supporter of something that matters, instead of being a hater of something that doesn't. 10 years ago, I never would have predicted that by just 2020, the AAA industry wouldn't be able to produce a single fun, good game. That it would completely separate itself from the 40 years of video game history to learn from, and from all the principles of game design, and instead just become a machine for marketing graphics. Marketing, well, what else is there? Marketing whatever is on the spectrum between a slightly interactive movie and just a broken collection of assets barely holding together enough to technically function, just enough to avoid being sued by consumer rights agencies. There is no video game crash on the horizon. We are, in fact, in the middle of a crash. We just don't call it that. I want to call it entropy, as in inside of the system we used to define as the gaming industry, there is no more fuel left to produce what we used to define as video games. The fuel being things like talent, strive to use one's imagination and creativity, and of course, the financial incentive to actually be making good finished games and just old school selling them. We don't have any of those things anymore, yet the system goes on. Not on fumes, but in an actually rather smart subversion of what it used to be. It keeps going and doing pretty well, all things considered, on turning into something else while turning insane profit. Becoming something that is not for people like us. It doesn't really suck as much as it's just not for you anymore. The old gaming industry, for all practical purposes, is dead. But what exists in its place is just simply holding on to the old name, leeching off the brand name they inherited. Inside this system, that is legally the same system that just runs a different business now, there is simply not enough energy anymore to produce what we value, what we used to call video games. It runs on a different fuel now. Its goals are completely different. So by our standards, what it produces is rather underwhelming, if not completely terrible. But again, that is not the failure of the system. It actually does exactly what it's supposed to be doing. The problem is us, the failure is us completely missing the point of this new system. And I am very happy for the system to finally reach the point of complete entropy. I would say the launch of the latest console generation was the most official of all the milestones for that, because That makes it very official, very definitive. And it makes me very excited that we are going our own way and we already have all the infrastructure and a lot of talent for it. We are not a segmented community of old school gamers, retro gamers, and indie gamers and game developers that just exist on the periphery of the big, largest in the world, actually, entertainment industry. We are, in fact, building our own industry that completely replaces the old one, which became corrupted and useless, and we don't have to deal with it anymore. We don't even have to look at it. There's nothing left there connecting what we are building and that thing. There are growing pains for us, of course. We do have people here who, for example, want to be creative and imaginative, but they lack the experience of living through the golden age of gaming, so they end up making game design mistakes and otherwise questionable game design choices that could have been easily avoided. But not just me. I'm actually a very nitpicky, judgmental prick who lived through the old generation of things, and I am very easily annoyed by people in position of privilege who don't seem to be knowing what they're doing and even caring. Not just me, but the entire market has already spoken, really. It's okay if you're not entirely brilliant. Indie sells. Indie is appreciated. People dig creativity and purity of an attempt to make something good over everything else. It's not down to technical ability. It's not even down to talent. It's down to good and or interesting and or cool ideas being executed. All the old original players are irrelevant now. I even accidentally grew to hate Nintendo Switch because where's my Skyrim on Android if the Switch can run it? Also, why is there no Android version of Darkest Dungeon when the game was even on the Vita? Or again, where's my Hades? Or Risk of Rain 2 for that matter. My phone can fucking emulate the Switch even. Barely any game works, but stability aside, while things are running, the frame rate is perfectly playable. With a controller clamp or Joy-Con style controller for $50, Backbone, Razer Kishi, or dozens of other options really, you can turn any modern phone into an ultimate gaming handheld, which is borderline free as well, since you already have it. The phone, I mean. So why do I have to play these games on the Switch when I already have my fucking phone? The only problem right now, and the Switch is kind of the biggest part of the problem, pretty much, almost all of the games have to be emulated because natively there are almost no games on mobile. Like, there is Slay the Spire, yes, very good. Minecraft, fuck, there's even a Switch version of No Man's Sky. Are you kidding me? No Android version? Are you for real? Subnautica is on the Switch, no Android version. I'm blaming Switch for that. Okay, well, I suppose I'm just going to play my emulators then, because, like, what the hell? Why am I supposed to have the Switch to play these games? The same thing with PC. Why would I buy $500 device to play, I don't know, Bloodborne when I already have a device that can play that game? It doesn't make any sense. What a waste of silicon Switch is. And I'm only being elitist about this specific thing because Switch is just a phone from 2016. I wonder if the developers in general are aware that more people have phones than Switches. That's not really the Switch problem as much as the game developer's problem, I suppose. I just wanted to point out that all the Switch is doing right now is holding handheld gaming back. Steam Deck and ROG Ally offer a solution, yes, but I feel like people could use a little reminder that between the outdated phone by Nintendo and a $1,000 handheld laptop, there is a perfectly fine middle ground option in the device they already have. That would only take between $10 and $50 to make it into a gaming one. $10 for a phone controller clamp if you already have a controller, $50 for a backbone or a clamp plus controller if you don't have a controller. And you know, about a year ago, I made my famous prediction that Microsoft will end up winning this generation probably because look at all these studios it has now. You know what these studios make? They make video games. You know what Sony doesn't do anymore? Video games. They shut down the Japan studio, so they're only making movies now. Good movies, okay, I suppose. I just don't care and I fail to see the point. Well, I fucking take all of it back now. Not a single studio under Microsoft now can release a working game, apparently. I don't know if Microsoft is just rushing everything or if maybe they are only buying studios on the verge of collapse as like a tax write off. But yeah, the biggest monopoly in AAA gaming that looked rather promising turned out to be as impotent as everything else in it. Another prediction I made about 2 years ago, with which I, as is tradition, was absolutely spot on, is that the console frame rate will go back down to 30. And you're only getting 60 right now, as in 2 years ago, because you're playing games that were initially developed and optimized for the previous generation of hardware. Once the games are made specifically for this new generation of hardware, the games will again be optimized for 30 because it's easier, it saves the developer time, the need for talent, and it makes games more marketable. Actually, because a game with ray tracing that runs at 20 FPS and it has Hollywood actors in it is something they actually know how to sell. And something that runs at 60 FPS and has no Hollywood actors and is just a good game, maybe even it runs at 120 FPS, baby Jesus forbid, is something they don't know how to sell, let alone make. They are not selling games to you and me. Their target demographic, which they themselves created, really doesn't know what a fun game is, it doesn't care what a fun game is, and it doesn't know what a frame rate is either. They only know ray tracing and maybe poly count a little bit. They know textures, definitely, although they use the term incorrectly. Some know the word shader, I think, but none of them knows what it is. So the first couple of honeymoon years of this gen, with this gen, are over when you only get to play games originally developed for the previous gen that runs like crazy on this new hardware, right? So those years are over. Welcome back to 25 FPS. I fucking told you these new consoles will be useless for anything, even more so than the previous gen, and the PS4 was largely completely useless. If only you knew how obvious it was for me. I am so goddamn smart. Japanese gaming is not doing especially well too as of late, and with the death of PS Vita and 3DS, we no longer have the market for easy to make small games that attracted so many talented developers, mostly from Japan. The entire meaningful segment of the gaming industry moved to PC. And the indie scene of 15, even 10 years ago has absolutely nothing on what the scene is producing right now. Gaming is indeed dead, only it's not if you can open your eyes. It exists outside of where it used to be. It's an early access, kind of, but you can already be enjoying it. You can wait another 10 years maybe until it is as good as it used to be and spend these 10 years in misery. The choice is yours.